Night fell over the small town, enveloping it in a deep and mysterious darkness. However, for a group of 5 friends, the darkness was not a reason to fear, but rather the promise of an exciting adventure. Their names were Laura, Daniel, Carla, Pedro, and Sofia, and they were known in the city for their courage and love of nature. The idea of taking a night trail through the dense forest that surrounded the city came up one summer afternoon while they were relaxing at Laura's house. Sitting in the backyard, they watched the sunset turn the sky red and orange. It was the kind of afternoon that inspired the search for unique emotions and experiences. Daniel, the group's adventurer, suggested the idea, and everyone readily agreed. It will be an incredible experience, something few have the courage to do, he argued. The forest at night is a completely different world, full of mystery and beauty. Without much thought, the group began planning the night trail. They prepared backpacks with flashlights, food, water, and suitable clothing for the hike. Laura and Carla, the most sensible of the group, insisted that everyone should take their cell phones fully charged in case of emergencies. As the night progressed, anxiety and excitement grew among the friends. The full moon appeared in the starry sky, illuminating the path ahead. The silence of the forest at night enveloped them as they entered the trail, and they felt like explorers in an unknown world. However, as they advanced through the forest, fear began to creep into their minds. The nighttime sounds of nature, which were normally comforting, now seemed threatening. The croaking of frogs and the rustling of leaves in the trees took on ominous tones. The path they followed narrowed with each step, and darkness closed in around them. The flashlights were their only sources of light, creating circles of illumination on the ground before them. The group began to feel the oppression of the forest, with its tall, dense trees that blocked out the starry sky. "Daniel, are you sure we're heading in the right direction?" Laura asked, her voice carrying a hint of concern. Daniel looked at the GPS on his cell phone and frowned. "We should be, but it looks like the trail is getting steeper than expected. Maybe we got a little off track." Carla pursed her lips, visibly uneasy. "We should turn back now, while we can still find our way back." However, Daniel's adventurous spirit refused to give up so easily. "We'll just go a little longer, and then we'll come back. I'm sure we'll find an amazing place to stargaze." Sophia, the most impulsive of the group, supported Daniel. "Yes, let's continue. We don't want to miss the opportunity for a nighttime adventure." Reluctantly, the group agreed to move forward, but anxiety and unrest continued to grow. They didn't know that their foolish decision to continue the trail would lead them to a series of terrifying events that would change their lives forever. The night forest had more secrets and dangers than they could imagine. As the group advanced through the forest, the darkness intensified. Tall trees blocked out the moon and stars, creating an even darker scene. The uneven, root-strewn ground made walking difficult, and the trail seemed to get narrower and narrower. Friends began to notice strange sounds around them. Dry leaves moved as if something or someone was moving in the shadows. The tree branches creaked ominously, as if they were trying to communicate something. Pedro, always the calmest of the group, was the first to mention his growing restlessness. "You guys heard those sounds, right? That doesn't sound normal." The others nodded, their flashlights flickering nervously as they explored the darkness. "Maybe it's just the night forest, playing with us," Sophia suggested, trying to keep her spirits up. As they continued down the trail, the shadows seemed to come to life. The friends saw figures moving around them, but whenever they turned their flashlights to investigate, they found nothing. It was as if the forest was playing with them, hiding in the shadows and running away from their lights. The tension in the group increased with each step. Daniel tried to calm everyone down, saying that they must just be nervous due to the darkness, but he himself was beginning to feel a growing sense of paranoia. That's when they arrived at a clearing in the heart of the forest. The full moon cast a faint light over the place, revealing something that left them perplexed and apprehensive. In the center of the clearing was a formation of stones, erected in a pattern that looked ancient and ritualistic. Laura frowned, feeling something was wrong. "This isn't normal." "What is this, Daniel?" Daniel, visibly uncomfortable, shrugged. "It must be some kind of landmark or monument. Maybe it's a good opportunity for us to rest and watch the stars." Carla, who was looking around, suddenly turned around. You guys heard that, right? Something moving in the trees. The group fell silent, and then everyone heard noises of branches breaking and leaves moving in the surrounding trees. It sounded like something or someone was approaching them, hidden in the darkness. Adrenaline kicked in, and they prepared for the worst. The flashlights came on, cutting through the darkness, but revealing nothing but trees and bushes. And then, suddenly, the group heard a whisper. It was low and indistinct, but it echoed in their ears like an omen you shouldn't be here. Everyone's hearts quickened. They turned around frantically, trying to identify the source of the whisper, but there was no one visible. The forest was empty except for them. Fear turned to panic when they realized that they were lost in the forest, surrounded by unknown shadows and whispers. Their foolish decision to continue the night trail had taken them to a place none of them could have imagined. Now, they were at the mercy of the dark forest and its hidden secrets. The whisper in the forest left the group stunned and on high alert. They exchanged nervous glances, trying to understand where that whispering voice was coming from. It was as if the darkness itself had come to life and begun speaking to them. "That was scary," Carla whispered, clinging to the flashlight as if it was the only thing that could protect her from the invisible threat. Daniel, ever the fearless one, tried to remain calm. "It must be a local resident, perhaps warning us that it's not safe to walk in the forest at night." Sophia wasn't convinced. But whoever it was, why didn't they show themselves? And how did they know we'd be here? Laura, the most cautious of the group, suggested that they continue to follow the trail back, but the flashlights could barely illuminate the path ahead. The darkness seemed to have become even denser and more oppressive after the whisper. The friends advanced slowly, still listening for any strange movement or sound. The tree branches continued to creak as if they were being manipulated by invisible hands. The whispers occasionally returned, always vague and unsettling. The feeling of being watched persisted. They could feel invisible eyes following every step they took. The forest seemed to be conspiring against them, as if determined to keep them captive. The trail, once seemingly endless, began to feel repetitive, as if they were stuck in a loop. They began to doubt whether they were actually moving in the right direction, or whether they were simply wandering in circles. That's when Laura tripped over something on the floor. She lowered the flashlight and saw that it was a strange object, half buried in the earth. As she dug it up, her eyes widened in terror. It was a porcelain doll, with glass eyes that seemed to shine in the dim light of the lanterns. Carla, upon seeing the doll, gave a surprised scream. "What is something like that doing here?" "This is bizarre." Daniel took the doll from Laura's trembling hands and examined it. "This is disturbing. Someone must have put this here on purpose. Let's get rid of it." But when he tried to throw the doll in the opposite direction of the path, it simply reappeared before them, as if it had a mind of its own. The friends backed away in horror as the porcelain doll remained in their path. Sophia tried to crush it with her foot, but the doll resisted, as if it were indestructible. Laura closed her eyes tightly and screamed. When the friends looked again, the doll was gone. Panic took over them, and everyone knew they could no longer stay in that haunted forest. They turned and ran, following the trail back in hopes of escaping the oppressive darkness and ominous whispers that pursued them. But the forest had other plans for them, and the darkness closed around the group with terrifying ferocity. Whatever was watching them in the night forest was determined not to let them get away so easily. The group ran desperately along the dark trail, trying to escape the forest that seemed to have become a living nightmare. Flashlights dangled in their shaking hands, illuminating only a limited section of the trail ahead. The whispers continued to echo around them, as if the shadows surrounding them were conspiring to confuse them and lead them deeper into the forest. Fear and exhaustion began to weigh on them, but the determination to escape was stronger. Carla tripped and fell, causing everyone to stop. She was shaking and panting, her eyes wide with terror. "I can't take it anymore. I can't take this anymore," she sobbed. Daniel helped her to her feet, looking around for any sign of where they were. But the darkness was relentless, and the trail seemed to have disappeared completely. "We must continue," he said in a firm voice. "We can't stop here." Sophia agreed with Daniel, but something was wrong. She looked at Laura and noticed that she was frozen, staring at something in front of her. "Laura, what are you seeing?" Laura pointed with a trembling finger at a shadowy figure that stood in front of them. She was tall and thin, with eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness. The figure was shrouded in shadows, and her face was indistinct, but her presence exuded malice. The group retreated, their flashlights shaking and dim. They didn't know if the figure was human or something completely different, but they knew it was a threat. There was nowhere to run, as the forest seemed to have trapped them. The figure began to move towards them, its footsteps silent and inexorable. They could hear his malicious whisper, an unintelligible murmur that seemed to penetrate their minds. Desperately, they turned on their flashlights to illuminate the figure. What they saw horrified them. The figure had no face, just a porcelain mask that covered its entire face. The mask's empty eyes stared straight at them, without emotion or compassion. Carla screamed and ran in the opposite direction, but the figure caught up with her in one swift movement. Before they could react, the porcelain mask was placed over Carla's face, trapping her in a cold, unforgiving embrace. The group watched helplessly as the porcelain mask absorbed Carla's soul. Her eyes became empty and lifeless, and her voice joined the eerie whisper of the forest. She became part of the shadows, condemned to wander eternally in the darkness. What was left of the group was in shock, but they knew they couldn't stay there. They kept running, trying to escape the shadowy figure and the shadows that chased them. As they advanced through the forest, the friends realized that they were becoming weaker and weaker. Their flashlights were almost out of battery, and the whisper of the forest was penetrating their minds, sapping their resolve. Finally, as exhaustion overcame them, they emerged from the forest. The morning sunlight bathed them, and they knew they were safe. But the price they had paid was high. Carla was lost forever, and the memory of the dark forest and the porcelain figure would haunt their nightmares for the rest of their lives. They swore never to return to that forest and never forget the terror they experienced. The night forest had revealed its darkest secrets, and the friends learned the hard way that darkness could be much more than a simple absence of light. It was a place where nightmares came true, and where darkness itself had life.